Hello and welcome to Train Signal. This is video number 1, Ad Hoc Wireless Networking. Let's take a look at our table of contents. In this video, first we're going to review the Blue Crab Food Company scenario and why it is that we're working with ad hoc wireless networking. We're going to learn all the basics of ad hoc wireless networking, definitions, and important facts. Next, we're going to create an ad hoc wireless network between the two Windows clients that we configured in our lab setup video. We're going to secure that wireless LAN, and then we're going to test that wireless LAN using Windows file sharing. Now keep in mind, this video assumes that you have completed all the steps in the lab setup. That means that you have two Windows clients, you have your wireless adapters installed on those clients, and you have all the needed drivers installed so that the computers can talk to the wireless adapters. So let's move on and take a look at our scenario. Back to the scenario at Blue Crab Food Company. Now, at Blue Crab, remember you're a contractor, a consultant. You're helping out the Blue Crab CIO implement his new wireless network. You've ordered the wireless equipment for the Blue Crab Food Company, but all of that hasn't come in yet, meaning you don't have the access points primarily is what you're really missing. So in the meantime, you want to experiment with some wireless networks between two Windows XP client machines. That way you'll learn about the different wireless client settings, and you want to learn a little bit about ad hoc wireless networking, which we're going to see what the definition of that is in just a second. So by setting up this small ad hoc wireless network between two Windows client machines, you're going to learn a lot about how to configure wireless networking. And that way you'll be better prepared for the future wireless configurations you're going to have to make when all the remaining equipment arrives. So to do this, you have two client machines. You're going to call them Client 1 and Client 2. We'll just keep it simple. Now let's learn what an ad hoc wireless network really is. So first let's take a look at some definitions. So an ad hoc wireless network is a wireless network with no central hub or concentrator, for example PC to PC. So that's exactly what we're going to create in this lab, is two PCs. They both have wireless adapters, and we're going to communicate wirelessly from one PC to another PC. So unlike a normal wired Ethernet network where you have a central hub or switch, an ad hoc wireless network doesn't have either a hub or a switch, so no central concentrator. Direct from PC to PC using a wireless link. So this would be similar to taking two PCs and putting a crossover Ethernet cable in between them. You're talking directly from PC to PC. Now this is in comparison to a wireless infrastructure network. In a wireless infrastructure network, you have a central hub or concentrator, normally called an access point. And that access point serves as the communication hub between all the remote devices. So you could have wireless printers, servers, PCs, whatever, and that hub or concentrator called an access point is providing the centralized communication. Let's find out what you need to know about ad hoc wireless networking. Ad hoc wireless networking is sometimes called peer-to-peer networking. It's also called IBSS, or Independent Basic Service Set. Now that's more of a high-tech definition there, an IBSS. Most people would just call it either ad hoc wireless networking or peer-to-peer wireless networking. Ad hoc wireless networking isn't used every day, and in fact most companies or small businesses wouldn't use ad hoc wireless networking at all. But it is great for like meetings or gaming, so if people sit down to a table and they want to exchange information and there's no access point available to them, ad hoc wireless networking works out great. It's a great example of wireless networking in action. Two people are able to sit down across a table with a laptop and exchange data. A fixed amount of bandwidth is available with ad hoc wireless networking. So usually this is 11 megabits because ad hoc wireless networking has a theoretical maximum of 11 megabits, even though it might be 802.11b or G. This is because the IEEE, when they laid out ad hoc wireless networking, they didn't specify higher bandwidths for ad hoc wireless networking above 11 megabits, even though it might be 802.11g. Ad hoc wireless networking has especially bad issues with hidden node, and that's where not all nodes can be heard by each other. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail later. So let's go on to part 2 of what you need to know. Ad hoc wireless networking doesn't scale well beyond 5 to 10 computers because all computers have to communicate with each other. However, ad hoc wireless networking is supposed to support up to 256 computers. But still, ad hoc wireless networking, like I said, great for sitting down at a meeting or doing computer gaming where everyone's in close proximity. There aren't a lot of obstacles in between or obstructions in between. All the computers can see each other. 5 to 10, small group, works great. With ad hoc wireless networking, you can't mix 802.11a, b, and g. You have to use either all A, all B, or all G. All clients must be set to the same service set identifier. That's the SSID. What the service set identifier is it's really the wireless network name. So when you create an ad hoc wireless network, you're going to define a name for that network. And that's the SSID, or service set identifier. All clients must have the same service set identifier. They also need to be set to the same channel. They must be set to operate in ad hoc mode. And if you're going to do Windows file sharing, you're going to have to, of course, enable those applications. And firewalls can get in the way of those applications. So if you're trying to do gaming or Windows file sharing or FTP services, you're going to have to disable your personal firewall, maybe the firewall that comes with Windows XP, or you might be running some other personal firewall. And ad hoc wireless networking can be troublesome sometimes when it comes to like Windows naming or NetBIOS naming. A lot of the things weren't tested by the Wi-Fi Alliance in their original ad hoc certification program, so they didn't test ad hoc at all when it came to wireless networking. One of the things you can do with ad hoc wireless networking is automatic private IP addressing. That's the APIPA, and that's the 169.254 network, where Windows systems can automatically assign an IP address in that range to systems in case there isn't either a static IP address defined or a DHCP server available. So let's look at hidden node. We said that ad hoc wireless networks have a serious problem with hidden node. What hidden node is if you look at this diagram here, you see client 1, 2, and 3. Now client 1 and 2 can see each other, and client 2 and 3 can see each other. And these zones you see out here, this is their wireless coverage. So when I say they can see each other, client 2 and 3 are in the same wireless coverage here, and they can talk to each other. Client 1 and 2, they're in the same wireless coverage here, and they can talk to each other. But notice that client 1 and client 3 cannot talk to each other. Well, how ad hoc wireless networking works is all nodes have to be able to talk to each other. And if they can't, you can run into serious problems with what you would call in an Ethernet network collisions, meaning nodes try to talk on top of each other. So, like I said, ad hoc wireless networking works great if you keep all the computers in close proximity and there aren't a lot of obstructions in between them. So let's move on to a network diagram to talk about how we're going to do this lab. Okay, we talked about Blue Crab Food Company. This is going to be their small ad hoc wireless network here between two clients, client 1 and client 2. So what we're going to do in this lab is create this wireless link between those two computers. Now, for me to demonstrate this on the lab video, I'm going to have a backup connection to client 2, or you could call it a backdoor network to client 2. So I'm recording over here on client 1, and I want to be able to record the configuration that I'm doing on client 2 as well. So to do that, I've taken two Ethernet cables and connected them to a basic hub. And I've set up automatic private IP addressing on this. Actually, it's automatic, so you don't really have to set it up. So I was just assigned automatically IP addresses on the 169.254 range on this network down here. And then I enabled remote desktop sharing on client 2. So from client 1 to client 2, I can connect using remote desktop, also called Microsoft Terminal Server. So I'm able to take control of client 2 from client 1 and do configurations. And I just wanted to explain this so that when you see me connecting with remote desktop, I'm connecting over to client 2 to do the configurations to bring up this wireless network. And that's because the configurations, of course, have to be done on both clients, not just one client number 1, which is where we are now. So let's move on to doing this lab. Let's get started. Let's configure an ad hoc wireless network. I'm going to minimize our slides. And now consider your configuration at the end of the lab setup, meaning you've installed two wireless adapters, one on each system. You have the drivers properly installed, And you should have an icon down here in the bottom right hand corner in the notification area for your new wireless adapter. It'll probably have a little red X next to it that shows that this adapter is not connected to any wireless network. Now keep in mind there's always two ways to get to your wireless adapter. One is to go down here and click on this icon. The other way is to go to Start, up to Settings, over to Network Connections, and then click on your wireless network connection. Now on this machine I've got a number of different networking connections, 2 wireless. In our lab here we're using wireless network connection number 11. So I'm going to click on that, and that will bring me up to the same Choose a Wireless Network screen as I would have gotten if I had have double-clicked on the icon in the bottom right-hand corner, the notification area. So what this is showing me is I have 2 wireless networks available to me, one called BC1 and one called Cooter. Now in your lab environment you might have multiple wireless networks out here available to you, you might have none. These just happen to be wireless networks that are available in my area. Could be a neighbor's network or a business that's around here. Could be another wireless access point I have in my office. So you can click refresh the network list here and see if there's any others. No new access points. But what this screen is usually used for is to select one of these, and then you click connect to that wireless network. Now one thing to notice here is that this is a security enabled wireless network. That means there's some sort of encryption, some sort of authentication or encryption like a password that you'd have to connect to this. Another thing to notice is the level of signal strength here. Notice the bars, just like on a cell phone, this one has a signal strength of excellent. So usually that's all you're doing in this screen here. You can refresh, look for other wireless networks, you can set up a new wireless network, you can change the order of preference as to what the preferred wireless network to connect to is, and then you can change the advanced settings, and that's usually what we spend most of our time in. So let's go ahead and close this out. Now we close that out, let's show an alternate way of getting to that wireless adapter. Just go down here and double click on that. Notice it brings up the exact same screen. Probably the easiest way to get to your wireless adapter. Now let's go in and change our advanced settings. We're going to start configuring our ad hoc wireless network now. So I'm going to click change advanced settings. These are the general settings for this wireless adapter, wireless network connection number 11. And notice these are the different services or protocols that are loaded on that wireless adapter right now. So the checkbox here tells you if it's enabled or not. This has got client for Microsoft Networks, virtual machine, network services. That's not normal. That's because we were doing some virtual machine configuration earlier. File and print sharing for Microsoft Networks. This is what you're using to share Windows files and printers. This is a protocol used for 802.1x that we'll use in the 802.1x wireless authentication lab. And then of course TCP/IP, the most critical part of this, right? That's where you configure this adapter to DHCP or static or change the IP address settings. Now normally we're going to go in here to wireless networks. That's where we do most of the wireless network configuration. So to create our ad hoc wireless network, we're going to start by clicking Add here. And we're going to give our wireless network a name. This network name, this is the service set identifier, or the SSID. So on each client, this network name has to be the exact same name, or else the wireless ad hoc network isn't going to work at all. So we're going to call this the Blue Crab Ad Hoc. So this is the name of our ad hoc wireless network for the Blue Crab Food Company. And keep in mind, we got to configure the exact same name on the other side, so you might want to write it down. Now wireless security is always very important, so I don't want to cut the importance of that short. But for the purposes of this ad hoc wireless network lab, to make sure that everything works the first time, we don't have any problems, we're going to go ahead and disable data encryption. So that means there's no security really on this ad hoc wireless network. Anybody within range of the wireless adapter could connect if there's no data encryption enabled. So that's important, but we're only going to do this for a short time, just make sure it works, and then we're going to add some security onto this in just a second. Another important setting for this ad hoc wireless network is this checkbox down here. It says this is a computer-to-computer ad hoc network wireless access points are not used. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're doing a computer-to-computer ad hoc network. So we need to tell the computer that. So we're going to check that. Let's go and double check the authentication tab. Nothing checked there, that's good. Then the connection tab, it says connect when this network is in range. We want to have that. It's important. So say OK. And then it gives us a warning. You've disabled encryption for the network Blue Crab ad hoc. Information sent over this network is not encryption and might be visible to other people. So that's what we talked about. By disabling encryption, anyone can connect to the ad hoc network and anyone can view the traffic going across the ad hoc network. So that's a serious security risk. But we're just going to do this for a few minutes. We're going to test the clients, make sure it works. Then we're going to add on encryption. So I'm going to say continue anyway. And then one other checkbox we want to look at here is this advanced button. So click on the advanced button here. And it says networks to access. And we're going to check computer-to-computer ad hoc networks only. So just to make sure we're not trying to connect to any other access point that might be around, we're doing ad hoc only right now. And I'm going to say automatically connect to non-preferred networks. I'm going to close that, and we're going to say OK. We have now completed the configuration for our basic ad hoc wireless network on client 1. Let's now go over to client 2 and configure our ad hoc wireless network over there. So I'm going to use this remote desktop icon here that I've created that connects explicitly over to client 2 through that backdoor network, not using the wireless network. I'm going to log on as administrator. Now, over here on client 2, there's a couple ways to do this. One is just to connect directly to the ad hoc wireless network. As it doesn't have any security, connecting to the ad hoc wireless network is really simple. Another way is to create a preferred network to connect to the ad hoc wireless network and let the computer do it for you. And that way it's a more permanent thing. It's not just a one-time connection to the ad hoc wireless network. It permanently creates the ad hoc wireless network on client 2 just as we did on client 1, so that if client 1 ever wasn't available, the ad hoc wireless network still exists. So let's go over here to our wireless network adapter on this machine and notice that there is the Blue Crab ad hoc network available here, and we could, as I said, you could just manually connect to it. Let's go ahead and set up the permanent ad hoc wireless network on client 2 just as we did on client 1. So if I go into wireless networks here, I'm going to add a wireless network. We have to make sure that the name's the same. We're going to disable data encryption. We're going to say that this is an computer-to-computer ad hoc network. Let's double check authentication, connection. That all looks good. I'm going to say OK. Gives us the same warning. I'm going to say continue anyway. And then here on the advanced section, we're going to say this is a computer-to-computer ad hoc network only and to automatically connect. Say OK to that. Our ad hoc wireless network is now connected. As you can see, we're connected to Blue Crab ad hoc. It's unsecured. The signal strength is excellent. So let's take a look at what we've connected to here. If we double click on the wireless network icon down here, we can see status connected. Speed is 11 megabits. So even though these are 802.11g 54 megabit wireless adapters and the signal strength is excellent, the greatest speed we can connect at is 11 megabits. And that's because for ad hoc wireless networks, even though it's G, you're still not going to be able to connect to 54 megabits. So we've sent 38 packets, and let's go take a look at the support information. You can see we've been assigned an automatic private IP address of 169.254.191.196. That's important. Go ahead and write this down, because when we go back to client 1, we're going to do some ping tests and we're going to do some Windows file sharing, and we need to know the IP address of client 2 because we don't have DNS IP naming here. We don't have a DNS server. So our subnet mask is a Class B subnet mask. Take a look at details, and as we said, there's no DNS server, so we need to use IP addresses explicitly, and there's no Win server either. So let's go ahead and close this out. Let's log off of client number 2. Go back to client number 1. Okay, back here on client number 1, let's take a look at our IP address here. You can see we're connected as well. 11 megabits, we've sent and received quite a few packets. Our support information, same automatic private IP address. IP address is 169.254.194.138. So that's important. We want to be able to ping that IP address from client 2. So go ahead and write that down as well. So now let's use those IP addresses that we've written down to test our connectivity. I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm going to go to Start, Run, type in CMD here for the Windows command prompt. So now let's test our wireless ad hoc network by pinging client 2 using the IP address. So ping 169.254.191.196. And we see we get a reply from client 2. That's great. So our ad hoc wireless network is working. Let's go ahead and do the same test from client 2 to client 1. Make sure our network is bidirectional. So I'm going over here to client number 2. And as soon as I get here, I'm going to do the same thing. Let's do it a different way this time. Let's go to Programs. Let's go to Accessories, Command Prompt, same command prompt. So same thing as going to Start, Run, and doing Command. So let's ping 169.254.194. Whoops, 194.138. Success. We're going to exit out of client 2 and go back to client 1. Now that we have configured and tested our ad hoc wireless network, let's add a level of security. So to go back and reconfigure our ad hoc connection, go down and double-click your ad hoc wireless network icon down here that's already connected. Click on Properties. Go to Wireless Networks, the Wireless Networks tab up here. Select our Blue Crab ad hoc network. Click Properties. And then here, let's look at the network authentication and data encryption. Now, for network authentication, this is access to get on the network. So we have either open or shared. We configured open, which means there's no authentication. Shared means that a key is used to get access to the network. We're going to configure shared for now. And then for data encryption, this is just, is our data that's going over the wireless network, is it encrypted or can anyone see it? So right now anyone could see that data because data encryption is disabled. So let's go ahead and configure data encryption using wired equivalent privacy. And notice that's the only other option available to us on an ad hoc wireless network. In this version of Windows, WEP encryption is the only encryption available if you're using an ad hoc wireless network. Now if you use a regular infrastructure mode network, there's all sorts of authentication and encryption methods, and we're going to configure those later in this series of videos. But on the ad hoc wireless network, all we can do is configure WEP. Now when it comes to configuring the key's not going to be provided automatically. We're going to configure the key. One thing to know about WEP keys is that there's different lengths of keys. There are 64-bit keys, 128-bit keys, and 256-bit keys. Now, the 64-bit key is the only key that all the different wireless adapters and access point manufacturers really support and make that completely interoperable. So if you have a Linksys wireless adapter, say, and a Netgear access point, you're safe using a 64-bit key because the 64-bit key is part of the 802.11 standard. Now, once you move up to a 128-bit key and a 256-bit key, those keys may or may not be interoperable between different manufacturers. So you're safe using a 64, but if you're going to use something higher than that, make sure that your equipment is all from the same manufacturer. So say you wanted to configure a 64-bit key. You would use a 5-character ASCII key, meaning a 5-character word or series of letters and characters, numbers. If you were configuring a 128-bit key, you would use 13 ASCII characters. Now the other option is to configure this with a hexadecimal key. A hexadecimal key is the numbers 0 through 9 and then the letters A through F, which are 10 through 15. So that's 16 characters there. And if you're using a 64-bit key, you would use 10 hexadecimal characters. If If you're using a 128-bit key, you would use 26 hexadecimal characters. So don't let this scare you off. If you type in an incorrect key here, I'm just going to put in the numbers 1, 2, 3. Let's see what happens. Okay, it tells us your network password needs to be either 40 bits or 104 bits depending on your network configuration. Now 40 bits matches up with 64-bit web encryption, and 104 bits matches up with 128-bit web encryption. It all depends how you look at it. There's different ways, but we won't go into that right now. We'll talk about web encryption in more detail in later videos. But what we need to know here is, are we going to type in a 5-character ASCII key or a 10-character hexadecimal key for 40-bit or 64-bit, or 13 ASCII characters for 104-bit or 26 hexadecimal characters? Let's make it easy, and let's do 10 hexadecimal characters. So what I can type here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0. That's 10 characters. Obviously not a very secure key, but this is just for testing and learning. So again, we have to retype the key, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. I'm going to double check the authentication tab and the connection tab here as well, and then say OK. Let's say OK there, and close that out. Now that we've configured web security on client number 1, let's go over to client number 2 and configure the same settings. So once we get logged in over here, we're going to go down to the information bar on the bottom right hand corner. That's where our wireless icon is. We're going to double click on that. You can see we've lost some connectivity over here. And when you configure security on an existing wireless network, sometimes it can get a little bit confused, and you might have to disable the adapter, re-enable it, or reboot the system for it to learn the new settings. So in this case, fortunately, it's already learned that this is a security-enabled computer-to-computer network. Sometimes you'll come over here and you can still ping client 1, even though client 1 has security configured and client 2 does not. And sort of the adapter just has to be disabled and re-enabled or reboot for it to learn that now there's security on there. So it's security enabled. It's trying to acquire an IP address, but since it doesn't have the web key, it's going to have some trouble doing that. So we clicked on Advanced Settings. We're going to go in here on Properties. We're going to configure the same settings that we configured on client 1. Our password, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. Let's double click on this to check the status. It says we're connected. Let's click View Wireless Networks. It says we're connected to a security-enabled computer-to-computer network. Now let's verify that that's working. Make sure our ad hoc network with security is working. So I'm going to close that, go to Start, Run, Command, and I'm going to ping client 1. 169.254.194.138. Hey, we get a reply. It's great. We've got security now on our ad hoc wireless network. I'm going to exit. Hey, it says we are now connected. Timing's a little bit off, but we're connected now. Log off. I'm going to go back to client number 1. Let's just double check our security from client 1 to client 2. We're going to ping 169.254.191.196. That's client number 2. We get a reply. Things are looking good. Now we're going to configure Windows file sharing. So to set up a basic Windows file sharing network, we're going to go to My Network Places. And here it says set up a home or small office network. This is what we're going to use to set up our home or small office wireless network. Basically, we're just setting up Windows file sharing between these two clients. Now, you might use an ad hoc wireless network for this. You might use it for gaming. You could set up an FTP server on one side and a client on the other. There's a lot of different things you could do with it. Most people wouldn't just use this for sharing files using Windows file sharing, but it's certainly a possibility, and it's a great test to see if our wireless network is really working. So let's click on this, and it comes up with the Network Setup Wizard. We're going to go through this, click Next. Yes, 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 we've installed our network cards. We know that's working. We pinged. We're not using the internet. Ad hoc wireless network is just used for Windows file sharing. We're not going to connect to the internet or any other residential gateway. We're just going to say other at this time. We're going to say this computer belongs to a network that does not have an internet connection. We're just going to set up two computers directly sharing files. Computer description, let's call this Ray's computer at Blue Crab Food Company. And this is client number 1. That's right. Let's say next. Our work group, we're just going to call it work group. We do want to turn on file and print sharing. That's the default there. We'll keep that on so we can share documents. And all those settings look good. Takes a second here while the wizard configures our Windows system to share files. We don't want to create a network setup disk. We're going to say just finish the wizard. And we're all done. Let's go ahead and close that window out. Now let's go over to client 2 and do the exact same thing. So over on client 2, which we're connecting to now, we're going to go up to My Computer because this computer doesn't have a My Network Places icon. Click on Network Places. Click on Set up a Home or Small Office Network. And I'm just going to kind of go through this quickly because we already did this on client number 1. A little repetition doesn't hurt, but we'll go through it quickly. So I'm going to select Other. This computer does not have an internet connection. This is Tom's computer at Blue Crab Food Company, client 2. Our work group is called Work Group. We want to turn on file and print sharing. And now this is going to configure our Windows file sharing. Takes just a second. Thank you for that message there. And we don't need to run the Windows setup wizard or create a network setup disk. We're going to say finish. And we're done configuring Windows file sharing. Now something I've learned on small ad hoc networks that don't have Windows Active Directory, WinServer, or DNS server is that you have to go in and enable the guest account to allow browsing of the other system. So if you go to Start, Programs, Computer Management, in here in Local Users and Groups, you'll find the guest account under the Users folder. We'll double click that, and we want to make sure that this is unchecked. By default, that'll be checked, but I've already been in here and unchecked it previously. So it should say account is disabled, and that's unchecked, so that means it's enabled. So we'll say OK here. We'll close this out. Another thing you need to check when configuring networking of any kind is to be aware of your firewall settings. So I'm going to go down here to the wireless network configuration, click on Properties, click on Advanced, and under the Windows firewall setting here there's the Settings button. I'm going to click on that. And for the purposes of our testing here, we're just going to turn off the firewall. Even though in the real world that's probably not recommended, we're just going to turn it off and make sure it's not causing any problems for us at all. Now in the real world, you'd probably want to just leave it on and go in here and set up some exceptions for file and print sharing. The other thing you can do is you can turn it on and off per adapter here. So if you have a wired connection versus a wireless connection, you can turn one on and one off. You can configure logging, things like that. So for our settings, we're just going to turn it off. Say OK there. Close that out. I'm going to minimize this and let's go back to client number 1. And on client number 1, we'll double check the same settings. We'll go to Start, Programs, Administrative Tools, Computer Management, Local Users and Groups, Users, double click the guest account, and that's unchecked, so the guest account is enabled right now. I'm going to say OK, close that out. Go down here to the wireless adapter and let's double check our firewall. Go to Properties, Advanced, and Settings. Now it's off here as well, so that's a good thing for our testing. Make sure everything works. I'll say OK there and close it out. So now let's test our network. Let's see if our Windows file sharing is really working. So I'm going to go to My Network Places and click on View Workgroup Computers. And great news, Ray's and Tom's computer at Blue Crab Food Company are both online. See here, this is client number 1, Ray's computer, that's what we're on, and client number 2, Tom's computer. So that's our client 2, that's the computer on the other side of the ad hoc wireless networking. So we know we're communicating over the ad hoc wireless network. These computers found each other. Let's double click on client 2. And more good news, we see that shared docs is available here. So here's a couple file shares. Here's a printer share. Let's go into shared docs, and we can see there's some shared files and a couple test files here. Let's create a test file. Make sure we can create files on the other side. I'm going to create a test document and call it Video 1 Ad Hoc Networking. Let's go ahead and open that document, and I'll put the word Blue Crab Food Company in here. We'll go to File and Save, and we were able to save that. We'll close it out, open it back up. So this is good news. Everything here is working over the ad hoc wireless network. Our Windows file sharing seems to be working great. Let's close that out and close this out. And now we have completed video number 1, ad hoc wireless networking. We configured our ad hoc wireless network. We added web security. We tested pinging over the network, so we know we had connectivity. We added Windows file sharing, and we're able to share files. So this concludes video number 1, ad hoc wireless networking. I hope you've learned a lot about ad hoc wireless networking, and in the future videos, videos 2 and 3, we're going to go through wireless terminology and designing and deployment of wireless networks. In video number 4, we're going to configure our infrastructure mode network. Once we have our access points up and running, we're going to configure security, we're going to add wireless clients on there, and configure a real infrastructure mode network. I look forward to that. Thank you very much.